All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack the European Union's first ever block-wide cybersecurity law. It's officially called the Network and Information Systems Directive, but pretty much everyone just calls it the NIS Directive. Just think about your day for a second. Did you use an app to check a train schedule, pay for groceries with your phone, even just flip on the lights at home? All of that, every single bit, relies on these massive, interconnected digital networks. And that's exactly what the NIS Directive is all about. It was created to be a kind of digital shield for those very systems. But here's the thing. That shield is being tested constantly. So what happens when those systems we all rely on are attacked? I'm talking about the power grid, the banking system, our transport networks. The potential for disruption is just immense. And that question, right there, is what finally pushed the EU to act. Okay, let's really dive into the core problem the NIS Directive was designed to solve. It all comes down to a fundamental mismatch in our modern, connected world. I mean, think about it. Cyber threats don't have passports. They couldn't care less about borders. An attack launched in one country can cripple services in another in a matter of seconds. But before this directive, Europe's defenses were, frankly, a mess. They were completely fragmented. Each country had wildly different rules and levels of preparedness. It was like a patchwork defense against a unified, borderless threat. And the stakes were just getting higher and higher. The scale, the frequency, and the impact of these cyber incidents were growing all the time, and they still are. We're not just talking about a minor inconvenience here. We're talking about real damage that can stop economic activity in its tracks, cause massive financial losses, and totally shake public confidence in the systems we depend on. So, to counter this fragmented and growing threat, the EU absolutely needed a coordinated response. And this brings us right to the directive itself, the creation of that digital shield we mentioned. So, what is it really? The NIS Directive is a pretty big deal. It is the very first piece of EU-wide legislation on cybersecurity. And its goal is simple, but incredibly ambitious, to lift the entire bloc to a high, common level of security. The whole idea was to finally replace that old patchwork defense with a single, unified blueprint for resilience. This strategy they came up with is built on 3 core pillars. It's actually a pretty smart way to do it. First, it forces every member state to build up its own national cybersecurity capabilities. Second, it creates the structures needed to make sure those states are actually cooperating with each other. And third, it lays down a common set of security rules for the most critical organizations. It's a classic build strength from the ground up approach. So, how does this cooperation actually work in practice? Well, the directive set up 2 key bodies. You've got the cooperation group, which works at the strategic level. They're the ones setting goals and sharing high-level information. Then you have the CSIRT network. Think of them as the operational, on-the-ground first responders who coordinate the response to actual live incidents. One sets the strategy, the other executes it. So we have the strategy and we have the teams, but who specifically has to follow all these new rules? Who is actually on the front line protecting our services? The directive splits them into 2 main categories. On one side, you have the operators of essential services. Just think of these as the physical and digital backbone of our society. On the other side are the digital service providers, those online platforms and services that have become so important to our daily lives and the economy. Let's get a little more specific. When we say essential services, we are talking about the heavy hitters, the energy grid that powers our homes, all major forms of transport, air, rail, water, and road, the banking system, hospitals, even the supply of our drinking water. These are the sectors where a big disruption would have an immediate and severe impact on all of us. And what about those digital services? Well, this covers the platforms a lot of us use every single day. We're talking about online marketplaces, the search engines we use to find everything, and the cloud computing services that power countless other businesses and apps. These services are so integrated into our economy now that a major failure could have massive ripple effects. Okay, so now we know who is covered. What does this directive actually require them to do? Let's go ahead and open up the Cybersecurity Rulebook. The first core obligation is all about being proactive. These organizations can't just sit around and wait for an attack to happen. They are now legally required to figure out the risks to their networks and then implement strong, appropriate security measures to manage them. This is all about building the shield before the attack comes. The second core obligation is reactive, and this part is crucial. If a significant incident does happen, they have to report it to their national authorities, and they have to do it fast. The key here is this. No more hiding major breaches. This transparency is absolutely vital so that authorities can respond, warn others, and make sure everyone learns from every single incident. And look, this whole thing didn't just happen overnight. The directive was rolled out in phases. By May of 2018, member states had to get it written into their own national laws. By November of that same year, all the essential service operators had to be officially identified. And then, by May 2021, it was time for the first major review to see how everything was actually working. So let's pull back and look at the big picture here. What's the ultimate goal of all these rules, these new bodies, and all these obligations? It's really about building a fundamentally more resilient Europe. The end game is to create a future where a high level of common security is just the standard across the entire European Union. It's about making sure the digital single market can function smoothly and safely, and that citizens like you and me can trust the essential services we rely on every single day. So, the key takeaways are really these expected outcomes. The whole directive is designed to create stronger national cyber teams, encourage real EU-wide cooperation, make us better at preventing and responding to incidents, and ultimately build greater trust between member states. And that trust is the foundation for a secure and prosperous digital economy. The NIS directive was a huge foundational first step. You could call it the blueprint for a collective defense. But it leaves us with a critical question for the future, right? As our world gets even more connected and the threats continue to evolve, how do we make sure this digital shield not only holds, but actually gets stronger? That's the ongoing challenge, and it's one the EU is already trying to address with the next evolution of this law, the NIS2 directive.